Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about programming a new decoder or a new locomotive that you might have just bought. In my case, it's this EMD SD60M BNSF. It is a Walters mainline locomotive and it is DCC ready. I've already installed a Tsunami 2 decoder into the locomotive. It was really easy, so I'm not going to make a video on that. So now I put the locomotive straight on the track. I got my cab, selected locomotive number 3, because all decoders straight out of the package or out of the box are set to number 3 as default. Let me see if we can get some motion. There we go. And let me just turn the direction. You'll see there's no momentum set. It's not really how we like to operate our train, so I will have to look at that. Headlight probably works. Let me see. Yeah, there we go. Let me turn the sound on. Oh, golly me, that's loud. We're gonna want to change that as well. I think the whole neighborhood can hear it. Not even going to press the horn button. Okay, let me just mute it again. So let's jump into programming. There's a few things we got to look at. I don't even know if this is the right engine sound, so we're going to look at that. We want to program the right number in it, locomotive number, and some other fancy features that we can set. Let's have a look. So guys, here we are on my computer. I use a GMRI software to program my decoders. It's a quick tip. I would recommend it to anyone because it will take you less time to learn GMRI than to program one decoder fully by hand. I have as you see here, the Tsunami 2 diesel TSU 2200 decoder in here. This layout might look a bit different, the menus, depending on the decoder you have. Especially if you get one like a sound value decoder, you have way less options. But that's the beauty of GMRI. It will guide you through the settings with explanatory bubbles of information that you might need for this specific decoder type. So I started off to just fill in these details. I didn't want to bore you with that. That's quite self-explanatory. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of programming this decoder to run on my layout. So I would use the long address, which is 8152 in this case, and so it's a long address format because we have 4 digits, so you can select that as well. Locomotive direction, you normally never need to change that. I'm just going to set it to normal. Speed steps, I like to use 128. I don't really know why you would use 14. The recommended is 128 as well, so I'm just going to leave that. And I always set my locomotives to NMRA digital or DCC only. This can avoid some strange problems on your layout if you just have all your locomotives set to DCC. So the motor, this is where it starts to get interesting. As you saw, there was no acceleration and deceleration set, so I always like to make this quite hefty. So put that at 175 and this at 60. This is a mainline engine, not really meant for switching, so larger numbers would be fine. If you use it for switching, it'll probably drive you nuts. I normally don't touch these coefficient and motor details. Here you can really tweak a motor. I think this is something you would do if you have a very old engine or a motor inside the engine, or it just doesn't run well. One thing I have touched in the past is this low speed compensation. So that's basically if your motor runs a bit jittery at like speed step 1, 2, 3, you can crank this number up to make it a bit more smooth. How it works, I have no idea, but it works. So again, if you do have problems, look into the manual of SoundTraxx, and is a good explanation of all of these numbers. Basic speed control, what to explain this? Let me go to the next table to explain the basic speed curve. You have on the vertical axis your speed, and on the horizontal axis your speed steps. So if you would go all the way at the maximum speed step, your speed in this case would be 255. So you see here in this selection, I am going to use this, and I'm going to use a 28-point custom speed table. You have all these 28 points that you can change it however you want. You can make a donut, a looping, you can make go up or down. You have some presets, you have a log curve, constant ratio curve. I always just keep it easy for myself and a bit simple. Match ends, and I always limit the top speed. as I just don't run my trains that fast. So the advantage of doing this is that when you're going through your speed steps, the locomotive will increase speed until you're around here, the halfway point, and you can still increase your speed steps by going to the right, but the locomotive speed will not increase because it's flattened. So the advantage of this is your engine will still notch up as if it has to work really hard. It will go all the way to notch 6, 7, 8, but your speed will remain the same. So you can get up those notches, especially the higher ones, they sound awesome, but without flying through your layout. To explain now, the basic speed curve is you only have a V speed, so V start, mid, and high. So you can only set the start point, and then a midpoint, and then a high point. So in this case, we could actually use it because we have two straight lines. So we have a start point, in this case is 1, midpoint would be, okay, it's middle here, so you would set it around this point to about 108, and then your end point will be 108 as well, and then you would have the same speed curve. If you really want a log curve, a logarithmic curve, or a constant ratio curve, you need to have these 28 points. You cannot do it with your basic speed control. But what I'm doing, let me set it up again. What I'm doing, I could probably use the basic speed control. So here you also see the advantage of JMRI. If you want to set all these 28 points individually, I think we do have to check them on, if I'm not mistaken. It would just, you have to put a CV code in 28 times, and you gotta probably draw this table out to get some kind of understanding of what it looks like. So it's going to be endless. You're not going to use it probably, which is a shame. Function mapping. So when you get the decoder straight out of the box, it will have the defaults of the manufacturer. So on the left here of the screen is the Tsunami 2 Diesel User's Guide. SoundTraxx, they really have great documentation of all their decoders. So you'll find quite quickly here on the top this function table. So these are the functions default from the decoder. And you'll see they're probably more or less also on the right hand screen. Dimmers, F7, yes. Mute, F8, yes. Some people make it all custom to their own preferences, which is fine. And if you want to program proto throttle, which I'll do in another video, we're going to significantly alter this. What I am going to change is this grade crossing at F9. That will just drive you nuts, so I'm just going to turn that off. The last thing you want is accidentally press a button and this grade crossing horn is going to blast through your house, and it's more fun to just do it by yourself anyways. But what I do want, F9, is the coupler clank. So coupler release, no, just the coupler clank itself. F9, and I'll leave the release there. I don't really use that. If you use a ESU decoder, this will look significantly different. It will take a little bit of used to get into their way of thinking, but then again, you'll figure it out in the end. The biggest change there is that the lights are mapped to functions. One thing I want to do as well, these FXs, they are not present, so I'm just going to disable all of them. Then the lights, so we have 6 options here. We have the front light in the left top, back light in the lower left, and then the FX 3, 4, 5, 6 on the right hand side. These don't work, so I'm not going to touch them. I'm going to change these to a dimmable headlight. With dimmable headlight, they switch on and off a bit more gradually instead of just flickering from one to the other. And I'm not going to touch the phases. Grid crossing logic is disabled. Don't want that anyways. I'm going to make it a LED. I'm going to do the same for the backlight, blah, blah, blah. And then here in the bottom, you can change your dim levels, which is quite nice, and your master brightness. This light does not have to be super bright, because for one, it's a bit annoying to be honest. And I guess your LED will have a longer life if you dim it a bit. The dimmer itself, I put it way down to 28, so you can actually see a difference between the full light and the dimmer feature. And that's all what I'm going to change right here. Analog control, well, we only use DCC, we don't use AC or DC, sorry. So I'm not going to touch this, we don't need to touch this at all. Consisting, I'm not going to touch this. I don't use it, and to be honest, I don't really know how it works. Advanced, this is mostly for your braking. We're not going to touch this now, but we will touch this topic when we get to a proto throttle video later on. And then we go to sound. First off is your engine notch rate, like how many speed steps do you want to change before it notches up, I'm just going to leave it at default. As said at the speed table, I can already go through my notches at this point in time. Interlocking RPM and engine auto start, these two are quite interesting, because if you change this, then the train will not move until the engine is turned on, which is great. Give a bit more, realism, and to make you go through the steps of as they would do in the prototype. I'm not going to touch the braking. They don't really use it with a traditional controller. And then now we get to the prime mover. So which one to choose? As you see, there's a lot of different types of engines with turbos and non-turbos here. The basic types that you have available is depending on the decoder that you select with SoundTraxx. And with different brands, I think you can upload them there yourself, but not with SoundTraxx. So they have a Tsunami 2 sound selection for Tsunami 2 for EMD diesel prototypes. So here you see the overview of all the options, but it still doesn't really tell you which one to choose. So what I normally do, I just go to our Wikipedia and I search for EMD SD60. As you know, this is SD60M. I don't really know what the M stands for, so I just read into it first to make sure it's not some type of different motor configuration or engine type or something like that. But no, it just means a safety cab. So we're just gonna leave that M for now and scroll back up. And then here you see the prime mover. Maybe I can zoom in a bit. It's the EMD 16/710G3A. 16 is probably the number of cylinders. 710 is probably the volume of each cylinder in cubic inch or cubic something. And G3A, I don't know what that is. It's probably the type of variant. So then we go back to JMRI, and then we see if it is in here. Oh, and behold, we have something that looks like it. We have G3C to T2. I think the M3 would be a modification type, and T2, no idea what that is. Could be a different turbo or tier 2. It's probably tier 2. Probably has to do with your exhaust. It's a G3, so I'm going to select that one. Real buffs might know the difference. I don't. For me, it's close enough. And then the horn, I could not find anything on Wikipedia on the horn. So I'm just going to leave the horn where the horn's here at the top, what it describes, a Nathan K3 LA. I have no idea if that's accurate or not. If anyone who's watching this video knows it, please leave it in the comments and I'll change it. Auxiliary horn, short horn, yeah, that's your button number 3. Bell, select, medium fast, is whatever you prefer. When I have a switcher, I prefer the bell a bit faster, because it just to give them a little bit more alertness. But for these large guys, I just leave them at medium fast. The grade crossing bell disabled. It's an automatic feature. Air compressor select. Yes, this is the same sheet here in the bottom. CV124 air compressors. It says EMD shaft driven. So if you do the CVs manually, you gotta set CV124 to CV number 3. But luckily here it's just a click of a button away. So where were we? The air compressor shaft driven. Coupler select, just leave it at medium. You can make it heavy as well. Might sound a bit better. Coupler release, no, I'm not gonna change that. Endorse that. Never really change that feature. Emergency stop, don't use that. Low pressure alarm bell is enabled. That's when you start the engine or when you have low pressure in your hydraulic fluid. Poppet valve, okay, this is an interesting feature. It is electric air dryer because it's a modern locomotive. Old locomotives don't have an air dryer, so as it says here, nicely explained, they have to pop the moisture out every now and then. This is also in the sheet on the left, in case you don't know it. Electric air dryer is default number 1. Generator select. Well, this locomotive, I don't think it has a generator because it's not going to haul passenger cars. So not mentioned on the left, so I'm just going to leave it then, steam generator. And true idle enabled, I always do enable that. That has to do with real life. If you go to a notch 1, your engine doesn't notch up yet. Idle and notch 1 are the same. I think when you go to notch 1, you just engage the engine and the power to the motors, but you don't really notch up. So with this enabled, then if you go to speed step, oh here it says as well, speed step 1, you won't notch up. And then you'll notch up only at speed step 2. Clickety clack, well it is a 3 axles per truck locomotive, and we have 2 trucks per car, 1 truck per car, that would be interesting. Quiet mode timeout, this is when the locomotive would silence if you don't touch it for a while. Poppet valve release rate, we don't have the poppet valve as we put the air dryer, so I don't think that's going to be relevant. And I'm not going to touch these. When in doubt, just don't touch it. Sound levels, well I like to change this a lot. As you heard before, it's way too loud, so I'm just going to turn my master to something like 30. That might seem extremely low, but then again, my philosophy is it's a tiny 1 to 87 scale engine, so your sound should be to scale as well. Air horn is way too loud. Put that all the way down to 75. The thing is, if you put your sound levels down, and you might enjoy them more, and then you'll use them more, which I think is the point. Bell, I'm not going to touch any of these. These are, I think, all the default values. I am going to increase my clickety clack because I like it. I like the sound of the click in the clack. And the cab chatter always gives some nice flair to the layout, so I'm going to put that up, crank that up. CVs, okay, in this tab you can manually change all the CV numbers. In some cases you want to do that because you cannot really find or understand the function in the relevant menu, so you can just change the CV by itself. Here you can see already the orange ones are the ones we changed, we edited, and the yellow ones are the default ones. So you can see we actually already changed about 50 or so of them. Alternative sound levels, I think with Tsunami 2 you can have a whole alternative mixer. So with the press of a button you can change all the sounds to these levels. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to use that. I think you would use it if you have a club layout and you just want the sound to be louder or not. Equalizer, yes, this is going to be interesting and important. So as we see, the speaker we installed actually does not receive or use the lower frequency range. It only starts from about 350. So what you then not want to do is send all these the power to the speaker for the lower frequencies. 350 is actually quite high, so maybe I shouldn't have bought that speaker in hindsight. So I'm just going to turn everything to 350, turn it off, because these lower frequencies require a lot of power. So that basically means you're sending a lot of power to the speaker that it cannot use. And it might shorten the life of it, and also it will probably deform it, which you don't want. So these 62 and 125 are well below 350, and the 251 I'm going to put all the way down as well. And 350 is somewhere in the middle, so it will probably be chopped a little bit. I can put it up a bit because I just assume there's a curve that's going to go from 48, a straight line, to 128, from 250 to 500. So 350 will be somewhere in the middle. I'm going to leave that at that. Then dynamic digital exhaust control. I did not play with this yet on this locomotive. I'm just going to leave it off for now. It is a very cool feature though, where you can have the locomotive notch up or down depending on the load that it's carrying. So do look into that if you have this feature. Reverb is also a cool feature where you can add a reverb, which is like an echo to your sound. So if you're going through mountainous terrain on your layout, then you might want to have a lot of reverb in your horn area just to give it that sound bounce that you get if you're going through the mountains. Automatic sound control, I do not use this. Here you can trigger all kinds of sounds automatically, such as a bell sound when you're slowly moving away from standstill. I like to just do that manually, so I don't use these features. And then we got legacy function map. Like I said, use this panel is not recommended. You don't need this panel if you use the normal function map here, which is way more explanatory. I think this is a legacy left over from the NMRA DCC standards. I will say this, that if you have a very basic or old locomotive with DCC, then these are the functions you're going to be dealing with. So it's relatively limited compared to these functions. And then the ID of the decoder, not going to touch that. I think we're just going to leave it at this. Everything is set. I'm going to upload all these settings to my locomotive, and then I'll see you back on the track. So now I put the locomotive on the track. I've selected it. Here you see locomotive 8158, as is written there, 8158. Let me play the startup sequence. That sounds about right. Turn the headlight on, and I think that's an alarm. There we prime something, probably one of the pistons, get it moving. The dimmer works. Let me try F9. That's the coupler sound. Let me move forward a bit, see how the momentum is. There you hear it notch up. And to stop. There it is. So here you see the result of our programming. I might change a few things. The dim light is very dimmed, and the headlight can be a little bit brighter. I did turn it down, but it can be a little bit brighter. And now I'm going to put the locomotive back in the box as I do model the transition era. And this locomotive is about, well, I think about 30 to 40 years in the future. So that was it for now. I hope you can take something away from the video on how to program a new locomotive or a new decoder that you might have, and some tips and tricks. Let me thank you all for watching, as it is the viewer that makes this channel. If you have any comments, please leave it down below, and don't forget to subscribe and like if you want to see more content just like this. Bye bye.